Hello, my name is Taylor Golden, and I am presenting an article analysis based on deviance. The article I chose is titled Notes on the Sociology of Deviance. It is by Kai T. Erickson, who is a sociologist and a professor. He served as the 76th president of the American Sociology Association as well. The author's purpose within this article was to go in depth with what deviance is and how we comprehend it. I find his thesis to be fairly broad, but through the entirety of his article, he gives much detail in his reasonings and his questions. For instance, he questions why deviance is known to be this bad, disruptive behavior, but it continues to contribute to a more stable society. He also questions how those that are deemed deviant are supposed to get out of the cycle that society practically promotes for them. The beginning of the article starts with the general definition of what deviance is considered to be in the world of sociology. The first page explains how oftentimes that deviant behavior is inevitable, in that when there are two contradictory beings, there cannot be a proven correct option, thus making any action deviant. The second page goes on to explain how the difference of an audience affects deviant behavior, the deviant person, and the community. The third and fourth pages of the article go over boundaries and how they are meant to create stability. Thus, when somebody does something that crosses the boundary, it makes them a deviant person. The fifth and sixth pages explain the so-called ceremonies that happen. They happen in the phases of confrontation, judgment, and placement of a deviant person, and how one ceremony could have a lifelong effect on the deviant person, even if they were no longer deviant afterward. Lastly, pages 7 and 8 conclude the author's article by questioning the generalized sociology assumption about deviance. Throughout the entirety of the work, Erickson challenges views of deviance as it has been known. The author even mentions that the framework for deviance is too narrow, and then he explains what it is to be known briefly and adds that the study of deviant behavior is as much a study of social organization as it is a study of disorganization and anomie, which speaks volumes. He then goes into more detail about how certain people and communities are presumed to eventually be deviant, and how the difference of someone being in a lower class versus an upper class makes them more deviant. There is also more to deviance than just deviance from our known society. For instance, the author explains how there is even deviance in gangs, because the gangs set boundaries within their community that gang members shouldn't cross. Lastly, one of the most important aspects in the article is how publicity affects deviant behavior in deviant people, especially as they go through the so-called ceremonies that eventually decide their fate of whether they are deemed a deviant person or not, and their punishment. One quote that the author brings up twice in the article is that deviance leaks out of where social machinery is defective. The statement can be broad, but it can also be very detailed. Deviance overall needs to be examined more thoroughly, and sociology contributions toward deviance and against it should be questioned, because in many ways, the higher-ups or government discreetly encourage deviance without the community knowing. The process of a deviant person being convicted is done in a certain way, shown in front of the community, and then they're treated a certain way. And these actions should be recognized and thought through. In my opinion, I find it interesting because to me, deviance has always had a negative connotation, and I think it still does to most people, because it is something that is out of the circle of norms and stability. However, society would be vastly different without deviant behavior because it proves that there are boundaries, and then it shows those boundaries to society when somebody breaks them. The author really goes in detail about how an audience, though, makes a difference in deviant behavior and with that deviant person. For instance, for hundreds of years, when a deviant person has been punished, it has been in front of others. And in modern days, this still occurs. We don't necessarily meet in town square, but it happens on the news and in newspapers. What would happen if that audience wasn't there, and the boundaries a deviant person stepped over weren't shown as an example for others? Would deviance in communities increase or decrease? Or maybe instead of the lower class being presumed as deviant, the upper class would be more deviant. The audience also only sees the bad, the punishment for the deviant person. There is no audience for the good, like if somebody gets out of jail. It makes me wonder how society would be if they saw the good as well as the bad. I do feel that in our current society in the United States, the people punished for being deviant get stuck in the cycle of deviant behavior because they aren't encouraged to be better. Their good goes unnoticed after one wrong. For instance, if a prisoner goes to prison for something, the prisoner gets out, he decides, I want to be a better person, I want to do good for my society, and I want to change. But even with those changes, they never receive recognition for that good. They are only remembered for their bad. Why would they continue to be good and act without deviant behavior if they're not getting recognition for the good they're doing as well? Like the author said, it is when a person goes through a ceremony of receiving confrontation, judgment, and placement, it is almost irreversible afterward, no matter how the person has evolved over time. Overall, I believe that deviance is necessary in societies because it involves people pushing a boundary and then learning that boundary so that the community can see the boundary as well. And I also believe if, for instance, the government told the public that deviance is a norm, which it seems to be, then it would completely throw off the equilibrium. The positive effects of deviance tend to be hidden in order to keep our society stable, but it is 100% necessary. Erickson created an article that brings so many elements of deviance together and questions all the right things. Thank you for listening.